a voluntary partnership agreement, or a VPA. And VPAs promote responsible timber practices in partner countries because the EU only accepts FLEGT licensed timber product imports. A voluntary partnership is negotiated but with a bilateral agreement to impose a timber legality assurance system, or TLS, to regulate the licensing of shipments, in addition to a mutually agreed upon definition of what constitutes legal timber. Vietnam is currently in the process of negotiating a VPA with FLEGT, which, if approved, would present an economically beneficial sector to direct UN RED funds. However, there are several obstacles that have delayed the negotiation. First, the government must build up resources and accessible information to enable smaller enterprises to understand and plan for meeting FLEGT standards. Also, Vietnam must push to finalize a TLAS that is in accordance with FLEGT standards in order to get the negotiation approved. The nation should utilize the capacity of the RED network to optimize transparency of the TLAS to avoid continued illegal exploitation. And finally, Vietnam must address the conflict between local communities and forestry companies regarding the legal recognition that is required in order to produce licensed timber, while also meeting local livelihood needs under the new sustainable practices.
So, in order to meet those needs, Vietnam can focus on PES schemes, also known as Payment for Ecosystem Services. So these are ecosystem services tend to not have a value in the market, and whenever they do, they're undervalued. So PES allows the transition of external values of these environmental services into, actual financial assets of the poor people living in Vietnam. And so Vietnam is the first country in Southeast Asia to actually have a national PES law implemented, and they've also been flirting with the idea for a couple of decades now with different programs such as rewarding Upland Poor for environmental services projects. But in that case, we're going to be focusing on decision number 380, which was implemented in 2008 to 2010. So decision number 380 contained different guidelines to help implement PES schemes in only two provinces, Son La Province and Nam Dong Province. Son La Province being an important province for watershed protection, and Nam Dong Province being an important province to look at how PES may affect bigger cities and more villages. So although these schemes were successful, there are many things that we can do to learn from these various PES schemes. Our proposal recommends identifying socio-economic baselines and assessing the impacts, all while enhancing trust by furthering accountability in local leaders, while introducing a grievance handling system. There also needs to be an inclusion of villagers and all social groups in the design of PES, and adapted based on the context of the provinces where they will be implemented, as well as each individual village. We also recommend defining rights in forest land allocation, while marking boundary ownership on the maps that would need to be resolved before any of the contracts are signed between the government and the individual household owner. And quality data needs to be taken into disbursements of payments to be collected on regular and timely basis. There also needs to be more development in group contracts versus individual contracts in order to one, make it more of a group project rather than favoring individual households, which may lead to corruption, as well as rich landowners taking advantage of the poor, as well as reducing transaction costs by having a fewer number of households to actually sign up. Also, most importantly, forest baseline conditions must be established, along with providing protocols for environmental monitoring that should include forest quality, soil erosion, and water regulation. Since self-reporting is the norm in the current PES schemes, there is a disincentive to report actual deforestation and degradation. So in order to combat that, we propose auditing from independent third parties and improve capacity and skills in data collection and analysis. Once these changes are in place, the proposed PES scheme would also continue to use a very similar structure to the PES scheme Vietnam uses now. Essentially, the buyers of the services will be broken down into 3 classes: hydropower facilities, tourism companies, and water suppliers. And they'll be based on 3 categories of forests: special use forests, which will contain basically forests for biodiversity and nature conservation; protection forests, which will be used for water shed protection; and production forests, which will be used for production of forest products such as wood. Currently, the PES scheme allocates 60% to production, 30% to protection, and 10% to special use. 40% to protection and 10% to special use, and we recommend making that more of a 50% to production, 30% to protection, and 20% to special use, which isn't too much of a change, but hopefully the gradual nature of that will make it more acceptable to the people involved. So Vietnam has around 6% of its forests already protected as part of national parks and different nature reserves. So we recommend that the best places to implement the PES schemes would be in buffer zones of these various parks and reserves. 2 high priority protected areas are here, which is the Capstone National Park, and up south, which is the Trung Long Rain Nature Reserve. And you can see the photos over there. And they're very important to protect, and maybe we can get some PES schemes in their buffer zones, because one of them is very important for the Ho Chi Minh, on all the water that goes into Ho Chi Minh City, and then the ones up north is extremely important for the coastal region to reduce the effects of global warming and to try and reduce erosion. And other areas such as the Trong Son Range in the southwest region, as well as a lot of the central highlands, have actually already been degraded mostly, as you can see here, due to war and due to various years of deforestation. So areas such as that, we propose that maybe forest plantation should be set out there to help compensate for the increased area of protected forests.
Both the changes in international compliance regulations that we heard about from Jamie and the implementation of PES that we just heard about from Danielle will result in an increase in protected areas or an improvement in practices used within these areas. The resulting environmental benefits are far-reaching, from flood control and cleaner water systems for local areas to climate change mitigation and disease control in a larger context. For Vietnam specifically, the biggest environmental issues are air and water pollution, soil degradation, and flooding during seasonal monsoons. All of these problems can be at least partially addressed by valuing Vietnam's ecosystem services in a more concrete and regulated way. Some challenges that may arise in our proposal are making sure all the actors involved have a consistent and clear definition of what encompasses a protected area and what practices need to be carried out to protect it. Also ensuring that the public is informed of the conservation plans and the benefits for them and their environment. And lastly, coordinating between the many levels of actors involved in changing international compliance regulations and implementing PES. There are a few fundamental problems with PES implementation in Vietnam that will have to be given attention in our proposal. The first is the difficulty of the benefits of PES not always reaching local households. Because the state owns the land and manages the forests, or only an elite few are able to access control of forest lands, the poor and newly established households are often left powerless and do not receive payments. There is currently no method of ensuring that all households involved in protection of lands receive a portion of the benefits, which is why we suggest a grievance handling system. Without proper establishment of the PES scheme and fair allocation of payments, the benefits for the environment and the citizens of the area are undermined. Another problem is that much of the land valuable for its ecosystem services is also valuable to local communities for agricultural income and to the entire country for producing food to support the growing populations. Current PES schemes generate far less income per household than does food production, but because of the environmentally unsustainable way in which slash and burn agriculture is used in Vietnam, a compromise is worth looking into. A final issue is that if Vietnam shifts to compliance with international standards, there are risks of losing business that come along with the opportunities to compete in new markets.
So the factors that will be key to our success are first, clear definitions of all legal terms used and transparency to allow the public and community awareness of the processes that they will be affected by. Only when both conditions are reached can there be mutual understanding and agreement between all parties involved. Once our reforms are instated, frequent progress reports should be made to an organizing committee so that proper enforcement of all measures can be ensured and the situation monitored. The eventual goal is to strike a balance between the environmental and economical values while reaping the benefits of both. For future economic reforms, we recommend the continued